G'day, I'm Mitch, welcome to Lounge Room Hobbies, and this time we're working on my Reavers, which is a mashup of two different box sets, and also we're going to talk a little bit about the move to Tassie and what's been going on since I got here. So as some of you may be aware, if you've been watching previous videos, and I can keep linking them, maybe the description is probably the best place, there's a few where I'm talking about it now. I moved to Tasmania, so this was for my full-time job, which keeps me relatively busy, so that slows down my upload. I try and get this out as quick as I can. And the move to Tassie was a big life change. It's uplifting everything I kind of knew in Canberra, and coming down here for a great opportunity, and opened up a challenge I've been through before, but a different one, which is trying to find a wargaming group down here. So before I moved down, I wasn't even sure if anyone was playing Age of Sigmar down here, which is a bit of a silly thing to say. There's two Warhammer stores, one in Hobart and one in Launceston, Launceston being in the north of the state. So, they're selling something. Hopefully it's not all Primary Space Marines, but they're here. So I did a bit of digging through Facebook. I found a few groups and a bit of evidence of events happening. And just before I moved down, there was a 1,000-point tournament, which I completely missed. Timing wise, it just didn't work out. But it meant it was happening. There was something going on down here. So I went looking for the group and ran into some great guys in a couple of different stores, and some of the guys working in the stores who had set up group chats, collecting Age of Sigmar gamers, and I got in relatively quickly just by asking, having a chat, which was awesome for me because it took away some of that worry I was feeling not being able to do a hobby that I really love and enjoy. I love going and playing and painting and talking this hobby. It's a big part. It's really hard to just do that on my own at home. Of course, there weren't a huge amount of events running, and somehow I found myself running a league. Oops. But it's really good fun. I'll do some short updates as we go along. It's just kicked off. In fact, at the time of recording this opening, yesterday on a Monday night was the first league night. So, hey, if you're at the league night and you're watching this, hi, I'm the same guy. It's awesome to meet you. Hope to see you coming along again. And hey, if you're in Tasmania, go looking for some of the Facebook groups, reach out, have a chat. You can come play a game with me. It'd be really awesome fun. So let's get on with this Reaver build and paint. And I'll throw some links to some of the previous stuff, like if you missed the Karanak build, I talked a little bit about this move here. So onto the video. The first step was just to get everything out of the boxes. Line up all the bases, unclip everything, and get it all ready to go. This was particularly important for the Awakened Beast models because the parts line up for specific torsos and bodies, so it's just getting everyone in a pile ready to do some messing around and converting. Then you got to clean them all up, folks. So I spent a considerable amount of time scraping all of the mold lines off, and these new multi-part dynamically posed models are fantastic looking. The Untamed beasts are amazing models, and of course they have mold lines in some of the most insane places. Along the edge of a whip is one that springs to mind as just being awful. Take your time with it, scrape them all off, put something on the TV, listen to some music, and just get on with it. For those of you that are wondering how long this will take, I'm just going to throw a timer down in the bottom corner for you. A long time is the answer. The Untamed beasts were never going to stay Untamed beasts. I wanted them to look sort of like Reavers, but I wanted that bestial feel. So the furs and the pelts and the bone is great, but everyone can't have a bone weapon. I wanted to mix and match and throw them around a little bit, which is where diving into the bits box helps. I was also looking for ways that I could add in armor. The Untamed beasts have a few things going on with them that needed to change. Most of them aren't wearing pants, so I started sketching out ideas while playing with these models, having them piled out in front of me, let me mess around and come up with ways of tweaking. The other thing I had to do is add in another 2 banners and another 2 horns to the unit and come up with 2 champions. So Untamed beasts give me 18 models, and then there's 10 Reavers in the start collecting box for Khorne. I had a plan for the other 2 missing ones, but I needed another 2 horn blowers and another 2 banners and another 2 champions so that I could run 3 units of 10. All of this was part of this planning stage. I've spent some time now and saved me some heartache when I get around to it later. After that, it was just a matter of attaching everyone to a base, and for the ones that I wasn't going to mess around with arms or hands on, or I liked the weapons they had, putting them together as far as I wanted. So for the Untamed beasts, most of this was putting their torsos together. Some got completely built, and for the Reavers, for the most part, it was just sticking people to bases and again putting their torsos together, getting everything ready to start messing around with, building that core form. I also chose one of the guys with a big 2-handed bone jaw weapon to be a banner bearer as well. So first step for this was just to clip off the top and bottom of his weapon and drill it out. I then settled on using a piece of plastic tube, polystyrene tube, as the shaft of the banner. So once it was drilled out, it was just fitting that through and adding a few little details. So you can see here that tube running through in between his hands and a couple of little like thicker tube to give it some strength and also to hold it, to add some kind of detail to it. And then it's just, what banner am I going to use? I have a couple of old Chaos Space Marine ones. And interestingly enough, it's not this that I decided to go with. I landed on using the back cape of the unit champion one. It has this cool claw and looks bannery enough with a little bit of tweaking. So I glued this onto the top of the pole, and we'll come back to it later with a little bit of sculpting. That wasn't the end for this guy though. His weapon gets to see a little bit of daylight. His original weapon too. I ended up drilling out the base of this kind of bone jaw piece and reattaching it to the bottom of his pole as a piece of extra detail. Banner bearer number 2 was built out of one of the unit champions. First step was just to bend out his hand with his jaw weapon on it so that it was straight up and down. And I ended up clipping the top and the bottom of this, drilling it out, and again putting in a little bit of plastic rod to form a banner pole. onto a horn blower. I've got some amazing bits and pieces lying around in this old bits box, one of which is some very classic Chaos Warrior bits, including this awesome dragon-headed horn. I wasn't going to use the dragon head this time, but I did take the shaft of it, with a little bit of carving and trimming. It was ready to get mounted onto the end of the hand of one of the smaller Untamed Beast models. Clipped the hand off, drilled it out, so that I could run a wire through the middle of it and glue it to the horn. The rest of it would be fixed up with green stuff. There are a whole bunch of other small conversions across the unit. I mean, I haven't even covered the other horn. I think that the key thing here is that there's no right or wrong way of doing it, but there are some little tricks. If you want to do a weapon swap, you need to run something through the center of it to strengthen it. There's two ways of doing this. You can run a metal pin through it, like I've done on a few of these, or you can run a plastic pin through it. This comes down to how thick the two pieces you want to join are. Another option, if you're joining something that's already got a round half and putting it into a hand, is to remove the piece at the top of a hand, drill it out a little bit, and then shave down the weapon you want to attach until it's got like almost a peg. Plastic glue into the hole and the pegged weapon into that slot, and it will go together and create a really strong bond. The trick here, plastic glue melts things to bond together, so if it's inserted, it's not just a flat plane, it's not going to snap off. I did a whole bunch of these across the entire block of 30, lots of weapon swaps, adding different weapons and auto weapons. I was just trying to break up and spread the metal weapons and the bone weapons around between the kind of classic Bloodreavers in the Start Collecting box and the Untamed Beast. Everybody should have pants. It sounds like a joke. It sounds almost like a meme. And the thing is that it's not. It's kind of problematic. I think a really classic example is my old Bloodthirster. It's such a great model and I love it. And maybe I'll put a spinning thing up here. It's got a chain G-string rather than like a tabard. And I think that's weird. And I think it's weird when you start looking at models that go into war not wearing pants, but wearing like ragged bandages. And then wearing ragged bandages for like boob armor. Or the fact that I have to say boob armor and talk about it seriously is probably the problem here. It's weird representation. You can do a tribal feel like in these Untamed Beasts and still give them pants and do this kind of like, you know, Neolithic hunting, wearing bone tribe, but still have figured out pants or long tabards, not just like high slitted waisted for guys and girls. I mean, at least that's equal, but it's still, I think it's a problem. And so everyone was getting pants. And I think that this is a thing that that I want to see in my models. I want to see something that isn't just like weird extremes, something a little bit more realistic. It's something I'm going to strive for a little bit more, because I have a weird problem with it. If you don't agree, hey, that's fine that your models do them how you want. Mine need pants. The first thing I tried out was adding in some armor pieces. And I found that this kind of spoon-shaped tool was my go-to. This spoon-shaped sculpting tool and the color shapers that I'll get onto using later, which are silicon-tipped, almost brushes, are the way to go. It lets you push and pull the green stuff around. And I was just looking for some kind of rough, squared, you know, metal-like shape to start building up some armor on the thighs here. There's no real way to describe how to do it. It's really pushing and pulling, moving the green stuff around as best as you can until you get a shape that you're happy with, and then leaving it alone to cure. I cannot stress it enough. If you're going to start sculpting like I have, the one thing that I'm so glad that I got after my experimentation gap filling Karanak, use your lubricant like I've got here. You can see it there, and I go back to it. Can't use too much. Color shapers, it's like painting the green stuff. You move it in small increments. It gives you so much more control than just a straight metal tool, because it gives a little bit. I can't stress it enough. It's definitely worth getting a set of these. Green Stuff World do a great set, and there are any number of other places you can get them. They're traditionally used for moving like thick oil paints and pastels, and as part of carving tools and working in clays. They're great for this. Get some. do not try this without them. I would almost say at this point, they're so much easier to start sculpting with. So it wasn't just about adding armor, and it's not just about adding pants, it's also filling in some of the gaps and finishing off bits and pieces. So I had to sculpt a mouthpiece for one of the horns that I made, and I had to do some tweaking on one of the, I think they're called rock tusk prowlers. I had to add in and gap fill just to change up their profile a little bit. Little tip, if you're joining two pieces together, let the lines on the piece you're joining guide you, particularly if you're doing muscles. You can just kind of follow where they go naturally, and it will join together and not look too weird. And then reference photos are going to be your friend here in getting them right. So go looking for anatomy books or shots out of a bodybuilding contest or anything like that. Really, it will help you guide how muscles are supposed to connect and how elbows and joints are supposed to look. Use that to inform what you're sculpting. And then the biggest thing is take your time. Green stuff, yes, it goes hard and it will cure, but it's not going to stop being workable in the time you're working on it. At least I wouldn't expect it to be. You've got plenty of time to make it right. Go back and mess around with it. And if you're not happy, you can take it off before it cures and start over. There's nothing lost by starting over. Returning to one of the banner bearers, obviously adding that back plate banner piece cape to use as a banner, you got to fill in that big gap. Easiest move here was to fill in the empty space without snapping it off the piece of rod it's glued to. And then I kind of sculpted it, looked like it had been threaded through the skin but behind the fur. So I didn't carry the fur over either, I left it on one side as if it's the back of a pelt. The color shaper was really helpful here in getting the right shape I'm using. I bounce between a rectangular tip and a rounded tip, and it just lets you get kind of a ridged, rippled effect, particularly over those fold bits. It becomes really important to make it look like it's flesh or skin. So how did I tackle the pants? I let the model dictate how it works. So you can see here on this female Untamed beast model, I put the lumps on around the knees, and then using a Reaver model as a rough guide for how it would look, I started shaping it. And I wasn't trying to cover all of the grey. I think that's the mistake you can make here. You don't need to cover all the grey plastic, you need to give the impression of cloth. So it's going to bunch up around the knees and it's going to pull seams back. So if a knee's bent forward, it's going to be tight around the back of the knee. If it's a straight leg, like you can see here, it's going to be kind of sagged around the front of the knee, and it's going to be tighter along the back of the thigh or things like that. So you don't have to cover the entire grey plastic to make it look like pants. You just need to give an impression that there's cloth covering portions, because it's going to be baggy around the knee. It's not going to come in tight. It's not going to be a strong taper off the thigh as well, unless they're wearing skinny jeans, which they're not, because again, they're tribes people. I've got to keep that theme in mind. They're hard-wearing, simple, tough things. It's not a bandage bikini like it was before, because it should never have been a bandage bikini. So I should preface the disjointed kind of spiel that is going to be this paint. Painting the Reavers, I could do a step by step, but I don't think there's actually a lot of value in the steps that I go through. I use a lot of things that I do in other videos. It's easier to talk about some of the little things I did to speed this process up and the experiments I did. It didn't speed it up a lot because I'm notoriously slow and I end up adding highlights where I shouldn't anyway, but I started doing things that have trickled into other things I've painted outside of these videos. They've sped me up and helped me add depth and change things around. And that's what I want to focus on here. So let's get painting. So here are the things I did to speed this up. Number one, I used 2 different base coat sprays. These are Liquitex brand sprays, a burnt umber and a raw sienna. That's all I was planning on using because I figured I could speed up the whole process if my base layer for skin tone or pants or bone with one of these 2, and I could split it up between the units and across all 30 models to make them look really different. Now I've got an Instagram story about this and an Instagram highlights. You can go and look at it. And the thing I learnt really quickly is that these Liquitex sprays spray wet, terrifyingly wet. They coat everything in obliterate detail, and I was not ready for that. And it freaked me out the first time. And by the time I'm doing this and seeing me doing this, hanging out in my socks in the middle of Canberra, I was ready for it. I just wasn't ready for the wind. So if you're going to use these Liquitex sprays, you've just got to do it really heavy and then give them time in sun to off gas and let the propellant evaporate, and they come out beautiful. So once I got through all of them, this mix of burnt umber and raw sienna, it was time to speed paint these. So I'm not going to go through all the detail. It's just about dry brushing different skin tones onto them. should mention obviously that there was a lot of base coating involved before I moved on to contrast, but where I could, I base coated by dry brushing or over brushing. It didn't need to be neat. I could clean it up with the contrast paint or with the next layer of paint or with highlight if I decided to do it. But there was 30 models here. I wasn't going to individually highlight every model 3 steps. And then I use contrast paint to add depth. That's how I got there really quickly with these guys. I then went back and I added detail where I wanted it, but you know, most of the bone got watered down Sigmar brown or snakebite leather. Lots of the cloth and leather on the models were Sigmar brown or snakebite leather, and the watering down was how I changed the tone. And all of the metal was Flesh Tearers red. Now, how was I going to differentiate these models? I wanted to run them either as a big block of 30 or a 20 and a 10 or 3 10s, and I wanted to be able to expand the units in the future. A really simple way for me was to use the cloth color to differentiate. So their pants, tabards, anything like that was how I broke them apart. So I had 3 different types: creams and a light brown, blue and a blue-gray, and then green and a light green. I can't for the life of me remember which ones I used, but these and respective washes is how I broke them apart, and I think they worked out really nicely. I even carried this across into the furs. So if they're in the cream and tan, they get cream furs. If they're in the green, they get a tan base and then this green dry brush and wash, which looks quite fantasy and magical, but also not super over the top, bright green wearing Muppet fur style. It's a great way to break them up and change the colors you're painting. The Flesh Tearers red became the unifying color. And you'll notice that when I do this, I'm not re-base coating before I do it. I'm just applying it over all of the dry brushing and all of the washes and all of the base coats and missteps and brush strokes that go in the wrong spot, because it adds great detail. It uses those as highlights. You don't have to worry too much with contrast paint. You get great power out of this awesome product. Not sponsored. Be awesome if I was. Not sponsored. Just really like it. The final step is always with this army, 2 different types of flock. The kind of sandy yellow and then that dead brown that I apply again with dabs of PVA, and then painting those base rims black. And just like everything with this build, it's a hell of a lot faster when there's less models. But you know, it's all part of the fun. All right, let's get on to the glamour shot for all 29 Reavers. And that's it. End of this video. I really hope you enjoyed. If you did, make sure to like and subscribe. Leave a comment telling me what's going on for you, what your local group's like, how have you found it if you've moved. And hey, if you're in Tassie, reach out. It'd be really cool to meet some more people that are super into this hobby. I've met some great people so far. I want to get to know you all. In the meantime, obviously you can follow along on Facebook and Instagram. And until then, I'm Mitch and you've been watching Bloodreavers Hobbies.